in 2 minutes. Lynn Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hello, and welcome to a snowy Wednesday, the day after the State of the Union address, which I did watch last night, and I suspect many of you did as well. You're such conscientious citizens. I have to tell you, the Obama on display last night is the Obama the Republicans absolutely hate. That's the guy they hate. That's the one. And I loved it. Following the midterms, talking to a majority Republican Congress, he not only didn't, come as a supplicant, could we please work together? He just came out punching and sure of himself and loose. There was just sort of this loose, like, been here, done this a million times. If there was no nervousness, no, he just looked loose. And loose, and I'd say in control. And here's how Obama being loose and in control reads to a Republican mind. Arrogant. Cocky. That's what they saw. This cocky SOB. This arrogant SOB. The Obama on display last night is the Obama that some people who don't realize they're racists hate. And they just know they don't like that guy. It has nothing to do with his skin color. But the fact is it does, and they just don't recognize it. Here is that skinny black guy lording it over us. And that is just intolerable for a lot of people. I was reveling in it. I took notes. I was working it. I took notes. And, I really don't know. I didn't listen to any of the post prattle. Because, for one thing, do you remember when there wasn't that kind of thing where pundits come on and tell you what you just heard? Remember when you would simply take in a speech and allow yourself to make of it what you will. That's what Americans did when they sat like this next to their radios for FDR's fireside chats. They took it in, and they themselves then understood it, took it for what they saw in it, what they got out of it. And that's what I'm doing when I make my notes. And I did not listen to the pig castrating Republican responder. I just didn't have it in me. And for those who not, this new senator from Iowa, a woman whose campaign ads got attention because she said something like, I spent my childhood castrating pigs, so I know how to cut. But I mean, it was like this. It was like I was thinking today that if a Democratic woman running had said something like I castrated, she'd be accused of being, a feminazi, right? There'd be something feminist in the statement. But when a Republican does it, talks muscularly a woman about cutting off penises, or balls. The fact of the matter is, they're coming not from a feminist place, generally speaking, and they're not seen as coming from a feminist base. But a Democratic woman doing the same kind of thing would. It's just something I thought. Anyway, so apparently the White House did something that has never been done before. Before the speech, they put the speech on the internet so that any citizen could read along with the president or read before. The speech that they put out also had graphs and other visual elements that would help drive the president's points home. And the network that I was watching, it was acknowledged that had happened, and the anchors were not happy. They really seemed pissed off that somehow the control they used to enjoy of knowing what the speech was had been taken from them. Caller, go ahead, please.
Hi, Lynn. I'm going to make a quick comment. It's similar to politics. How come the United States doesn't get outraged over Saudis beheading women? They just did it the other day or whatever.
They beheaded a woman?
Yes, for cheating on her husband, and she begged for her. They do that on a regular basis, but we look the other way.
Oh, yeah.
Why is that? I mean,
well, you know why.
Human rights and all that, but now if they do it, we don't say nothing.
We know why. I mean, you know why.
Yeah, I know why, but I'm just saying, aren't we a hypocrite?
Yes.
People? Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Thank
all
you.
I had to say.
Bye. That is, you're looking at geopolitics. I mean, nations invariably look to their interests when they decide who's their friend and who's their enemy. And God, I got something like that. And our enduring friendship with the Saudis has been coming under increasing stress as more and more people start connecting dots, and as it becomes increasingly obviously hypocritical that on the one hand we support the Saudis, and on the other hand they produce the Islamists who are bent on destroying us. So, yeah. A little uncomfortable. I would think, since now supposedly we are relatively independent of their oil, aren't we? That then why do we have to cozy up to them? I'm a little confused about that part. Anyway, back to the speech. So the president just jumped right in. I loved it. He jumped right in, and he took them on from the first words he spoke. He took on the Republicans. He said this: at every step, we were told our goals were misguided or too ambitious, that we would crush jobs and explode deficits. Instead, we have seen the fastest economic growth in over a decade, since 1999, in fact. Our deficits has been cut by 2/3, a stock market that has doubled, and healthcare inflation at its lowest rate in 50 years. I loved the fact he came out and threw that facts right in their miserable faces. That everything, how they're always saying, oh no, don't do, that's terrible. That'll make the deficit, that'll go up, that'll cause jobs to be lost. And they're always wrong. They're wrong. They're wrong again and again and again. And he came out and flat out said it to him. Good. Here's the deal. Some people would say, well, why is he, like rubbing their noses in it when he's got to work with these jerks? Well, look, Obama's not an idiot. First of all, he knows that they don't have a good track record of working well with others. And he also knows that that speech is not for all of those self-important hoo-has sitting in front of him. That speech is for you. And it's for everybody in the country who has taken the time to listen to what this president says. I did hear that a poll taken after the speech showed, in terms of the things that Obama outlined that he would like to see done to continue the growth that has begun under his administration, that 70% of Americans polled supported him. 70%. So here's what America's got to figure out. Why, if you support this president, do you elect to the Congress and to the legislatures Republicans who don't support any of that legislation? Ultimately, it comes down to us being, I think, confused, the American voters. So, he said, the shadow of crisis has passed, and the state of our union is strong. Now, they always say that somewhere at the beginning, and the state of our union is strong. And then everybody rises up and cheers. The Republicans, as far as I could see, sat. They couldn't stand up for the state of our union is strong. The things they didn't stand up for were mind-boggling. They didn't stand up for, we've created 11 million new jobs. They didn't stand up. They didn't stand up for energy independence, and that gas prices were so low that the average American was saving this year $750 at the pump this year. Those are big numbers. They didn't stand up. More people insured. They didn't stand up. The deficit cut by 2/3. They didn't stand up. The lowest unemployment rate in a long time. They didn't stand up. And the president then looked at them and said, this is good news, people. I loved it. I loved it. And clearly, Republican leadership had told the Republicans who were in attendance, no one is to shout anything or to show disrespect. It was clear that they had been read the Riot Act. Clear. So, you see how important it is to hold the presidency, which seems to be all Democrats can do. There he was in front of all of those hostile Republicans, but he controlled the room. And I'll tell you, the minority Democrats in that room were having a field day. They were having fun. He said a lot of wonderful things. He said, guess what? Quality child care, that's not a woman's issue. It is an economic issue, and it should be a priority for all of us. He pointed out we are the only, and there are so many of these things. We are the only advanced nation that doesn't mandate that a sick worker be allowed a sick day and be allowed to know that they can take a day to get well and they will still be paid and they will not lose their jobs. We're the only one. Republicans, of course, approve of that kind of thing. That's right, no sick leave, no minimum wage, no child care, no college. That they would clap for. But they weren't getting any of that last night. I saw something during that speech that I'd never seen before. Boehner, who is sitting behind the president, so he's visible throughout the speech. There's the vice president and Boehner. The president was, at the time, talking about unions and how we needed to strengthen unions. And Boehner actually blew his nose. I've never seen either of those two guys who sit behind. And I've never seen, although sometimes it was Nancy Pelosi, I have never seen that. It looked, maybe he just had to blow his nose, but it didn't look good. Boehner he looked like he was going to puke through almost the entire speech. He looked so miserable. It made my night. And the other weird thing, I was sort of laughing about it, looking at those three men, the difference in their color was an example of the diversity of America. There was a white guy, Biden. There was a black guy, the president. And there was a red guy, Boehner, whose skin tone really is not on the charts. He is so bizarre looking. All right. Obama's saying we should make community college available to anyone, that it's an economic issue. It's a middle-class issue. The Republicans sat. The president was delineating all the good economic news that has occurred under him, the pullback from, the abyss, and then this turnaround, all indicators saying our economy is definitely on the up. And Obama and Boehner looked like he was going to be sick. And there's something funny about the disconnect between the reality that Obama was pointing out, the success, and the misery that caused John Boehner and the Republicans. One of the few things that got everybody up was when he said something about a bipartisan infrastructure plan. I was glad to see that the Republicans actually stood up for that, so maybe that's something they are going to do. The other thing that always gets everybody to stand up is any mention of soldiers. You mention a soldier, active or retired, and boy, they pop up fast. But that's about it. That's about it. Oh, yeah, the Republicans stood up when he mentioned drone attacks. Yeah, see, that's the kind of thing. Yes, they're up. But mention child care, mention college, affordable college, mention any of that, they can't get up. He really, I mean, he hit all the, he had a good speech. At 9:48, I noted, he hasn't mentioned global warming. 3 minutes later, he did. He acknowledged a lot of things. The rise of the temperature, the rise of anti-Semitism. He sort of didn't leave anything. People said, oh, the first time ever that a president said in a speech, in a State of the Union address, transgender. And I believe he also said, what's the, I want to say Snapchat, but that's not it. He also made some reference to video sharing as just a, and then talked about gays, he talked about abortion rights, he talked about police, he talked about minorities, and then he talked about what Republicans love to talk about more than anything else, and that is American exceptionalism. The interesting thing was Obama's exceptionalism is not the exceptionalism of the Republicans. Whenever Republicans are talking about exceptionalism, I think they always seem to be talking about, I don't know, muscle of some sort. And the president, and I thought, well, here the arrogant, self-assured, cocky president noted that he was aware that he was a black man. Because he said, to him, American exceptionalism is that it is a nation that gave someone like me a chance. That's what he said. A nation that gave someone like me a chance. And then he went off into la-la land saying hopeful things like, I still believe that we are one people. And he said, imagine if we broke out of our old problems and habits of going at each other. Imagine if we debated each other without demonizing each other. Imagine if we didn't focus on, trivial gaffes or gotcha moments. Imagine. Well, I thought, yeah, right, imagine, forget about it. I mean, the reality is the media, even if, let's say, the politicians decide, okay, you know what, we're going to do that. It wouldn't be allowed by media, not the way media cover politics. They love the gotcha moment. They can live for weeks on a trivial gaffe. So when the president said, let's have arguments, but let's make them worthy of this body and of our country, I thought, nice thought, Barack. Nice thought, but it ain't going to happen. And that is really sad. The greatest moment in the speech, without a doubt, was an ad lib. And this is he too. This was Obama, the uppity black guy. This was Obama, the cocky, arrogant Obama that all the racists hate and the Republicans simply cannot abide. He said something to the effect that I have no more campaigns to run. And the Republicans start cheering. That's the one time that they actually rouse themselves. And he didn't miss a beat. He shot back. I know because I won both of them. And then the Democrats went berserk. And John Boehner looked like he was going to puke. I loved it. That was my last campaign. Yeah, I know. Because I won both of them, you assholes. That he didn't say. So, you know, you can pick apart these speeches, but I thought as these kinds of, I hate State of the Union addresses. As State of the Union addresses go, I loved it. I loved the attitude. I loved the triumphalism. You know, the narrative that the Republicans would have America believe, and much of the media would have America believe, is that we are so effed up. But the fact is, that Obama pointed out, is we have been pulled back from the precipice. There are so many indicators that should give us hope, and so clearly has his policies put us in a better place. I loved it. It was, we interrupt this circus for some facts. All right, well, so that's all I have to say. Let's see what you guys have to say. I got Kristen. Boehner also looked like he had a bad spray tan job. Yeah, I don't know. You know what? My understanding is he's like a crack golfer. Shows how hard he works because, you know, to play golf, you need time. He is forever on the golf course, and maybe that's where the color comes from. But I do think, since you see it constantly, that he must have an artificial tan some of the times. I don't know. Why would anybody want their face to look that color? Because it's red. It's a reddish, strange color. Do you remember the time, I think, I forget, Obama made a remark about his color that was so funny, and I've forgotten it. Sorry. Chuck writes, I did listen to the Iowa Senator Joni Ernst's response. And she started by saying that she wasn't going to respond to Obama's speech. Well, you know, she had to have written her speech before she heard Obama's speech. So I'll give her, I don't know how you ever, the other party response is always a shot in the dark and is almost invariably ridiculed. Because how do you respond to something you haven't even heard? Unless someone had the cojones to not write a speech, to literally listen to the president's speech and then just to get up and do a rebuttal. Okay, so Chuck, you obviously watched the crap afterwards. I just couldn't. He said Ted Cruz, the senator from Texas, was complaining that the Tea Party deserved time for their own response, which tells me the Tea Party is still a problem for John Boehner. Oh, yeah, and for the Republicans have a little, they're sort of like Muslims right now. They have a sort of a civil war going on, an internal power struggle that is harming them, but they can't quite figure out what to do about it. Chuck writes, how can those Republicans not clap for an improved economy, for lower gas prices, for job growth? Well, we know why they can't, because they're pissed off that we have an improving economy and lower gas prices and job growth, because it happened when this upstart, uppity, arrogant black guy was the president. Ruth Ginsburg does not look very healthy. Yeah, I looked at her. She never looks healthy. I mean, she was sort of, first, she was just this, she's like this little gnome who's sort of curled up in her seat. I know. But that's one feisty little gnome. Do not ever count that little thing out. I mean, she has battled cancer twice. Cancer's the kill. She beat pancreatic cancer, and she beat, what do you call that? Bowel, cancer.
Stomach lining or gastric?
Not stomach, gastric. What do you call that? Intestinal. I mean, whatever.
Intestinal cancer?
Anyway, but she's, feisty. What else we got here? Margaret says it was an outstanding State of the Union address. And William says, I sure appreciated that I won both. Remark. And, the president in talking about minimum wage, he and how we've got to get American workers pay up. All the money has to stop going to this 1% bunch. They don't need it. But the working poor sure as hell do. And he actually said to these jerks who are so out of touch, you try living on $15,000 a year. So that was another, just in your face. William writes, but I was distracted by the men in black. Oh, in back. What men in black? The men in back. They're always there. Biden had a simple glass of water, but Boehner had, I didn't know, what? Perhaps a model of a moon base? He was drinking out of something, right? And blowing his nose and generally looking ill. A little research, William writes, taught me that it was an ornate, antique, triple inkstand of silver. Oh, he wasn't drinking out of it then. Of silver and crystal. Boehner and his giant gavel. He loves the trappings of his office, which he is tearfully thankful for, but is all too easily overshadowed by. No wonder he spent the address looking like he had just had Brussels sprouts. Now, don't get on Brussels sprouts. I like those cute little things. They're so cute. Okay, that's it as far as I know. Anyone else have anything to say? If not, we shall move on, I think. Okay. I have stuff here. Remember that story I told you about? Actually, you guys alerted me to the story of the couple who were facing action by the Children and Youth Services or whatever because they allowed their two children to walk to the park. And for the first time, I heard that there was something called free-range parenting. And I was thrilled to hear it, that this was, these parents considered themselves free-range parenting proponents, and they believed that allowing children to have responsibility, to not be hovered over, to be allowed to explore the world and to be not only educated by that, but to have a sense of mastery of their own lives. I didn't know there was this word for it, but I was born a free-range mother. I am the product of a free-range mother. And I think a lot of people my age, and maybe a little younger, for another 10 years or so, had the benefit of growing up in a society that didn't think children were the center of the universe and also didn't worry about them constantly, right? Your kids ran out the door. They walked to school. When they got home from school, they ran out the door. They just had to be home by dinner. You didn't even ask where they were. Nobody cared. It was just freedom. So anyone who had that kind of a free childhood, a free-range childhood, I think without a doubt is better off for it. Well, it turns out there's actually a book written about it called Free Range Kids. How to Raise Safe, Self-Reliant Children. And there's something called the Free Range Kids Project. And there's also a 13-part series starting tomorrow on Discovery Life channel called World's Worst Mom, in which I think the author of Free Range Kids visits the homes of helicopter parents and does an intervention. It's like based on the shows like the nanny shows and even those Cesar with the dogs. You got something that ain't working with your dog. He comes in and fixes it in 2 seconds. And generally speaking, the problem is always the person, not the dog. I mean, it's and with children, the problem is the parents, not the child. And every time I start squawking about this kind of thing and let your kids walk and let your kids take the bus and people look at me like I'm stark raving mad. And they always say the same thing. The world is a more dangerous place than it was when you were a kid. And I've always is that true? In fact, I suspected it wasn't true. And now I have proof. Right here. This is from research done at Boston College. I mean, where they compiled all of this stuff that parents are so scared of and really looked into whether or not these were real threats. Listen to this. And people who aren't so easily scared know this. The actual rate of strangers abducting or molesting children is teeny tiny, so it's like, you got as much chance of a submarine falling out of the sky and squashing you. I mean, you gotta know what to be worried about. And that's not how children get harmed. If you know, it is far more likely that if your child is molested or abducted, it is by someone in your own home. It is by a friend or a relative. If you actually look at statistics, there is no increase in dangers to children. None. In fact, there's a decrease. Experts say there is no more crime against children by strangers today, and probably significantly less than in the 50s when I was growing up. When kids walked to school by themselves, when they played unsupervised by adults, where they used their imagination, where pickup games got played and kids worked out the rules. Think of what the kids today are losing. It breaks my heart. Everything run by grown-ups, structured, and they have to be driven to these things. It's so damn sad. Stress and anxiety among children, that is way, way up. And I'll tell you where that's coming from. It's coming from the environment that parents create. That the world is unsafe. And that they are incapable of navigating it by themselves. And so I despair, I have despaired at anybody listening to me or agreeing with me about this. I am so thrilled that there's actually a movement now, and that there's books, and that there'll even be TV shows ridiculing helicopter parents. There are clear signs that the astronomical rise in childhood depression and anxiety, they're 5 to 8 times more common than they were when I was a kid. Now, some of that might be increased diagnoses, but on the other hand, it is because of the environment children are living in today, and the environment is not stressful because there's child abusers behind every tree. It's more stressful because their parents think there are. We have a caller. Hello? Hello, caller? Nah. Sounds like my white noise machine. And what child psychiatrists are saying is that young people today are much more likely than young people in the 50s and 60s to have a sense of control of their lives and to feel that they are capable of dealing with whatever life brings them. And that is because they haven't been given a chance to do it. Caller, go ahead, please.
Yes, Lynn. Hey, Lynn, I grew up in the 60s, and I think you grew up in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me in the 50s, there was a lot of hidden abuse. Sexually, you saw the priests and things abusing the kids in the 50s and 60s.
That's right.
I think in the 50s you could beat your wife. Wasn't there a certain rule?
Well, in many states it was perfectly. Listen, in the 50s, my God, women couldn't. Yeah, but children were no more at risk than they are today.
You could beat your kids. I mean, that was cool, but that was okay. You could beat the kids. Like I said, I think there was so much darkness. That's what I tell people. I mean, stop this nonsense. There's much more people talking and communicating right now
than ever before.
Fathers are much more tactile with their kids, much more loving.
That's right.
I love my father. He's 78 years old, but we weren't best buddies. He wasn't my friend. I mean,
no.
I tell my kids this. I tell my kids growing up, tell your friends, I'm Mr. Cook. I'm not Mike. You're not my friends. I don't hang with teenagers.
Do you know that reminds me when my son was very young, I would introduce him to an adult. This is Mrs. Smith.
Yes.
And Mrs. Smith invariably would say, "Oh, call me."
I don't say that.
Call me Mary.
Yeah,
and I would be angry because I'm trying to teach my son that you respect an older person. And she was saying, no, treat me as an equal. And I didn't want that. So I'm old-fashioned in that way, too.
Yeah, don't do that. That's terrible to kids.
Or the teachers even. Actually, my brother and I were talking about this just the other day, and he was saying how you address someone, especially someone in authority, has a lot to do with then how, interaction. And he's talking about how he bumps into students that he had who are now in their 40s and they have great careers going, and they walk up to him and say, "Oh, Professor Miller, hello." And he says, "I feel like, okay, I want to say to them, and I do often, hey, look, we're on the same plane now. Call me Bill." And he says, it's interesting. It's like a 50-50 breakdown. Some of them are very happy to do so, and others simply can't.
I can't.
Yeah,
I
I'm like
was
that
taught
too.
By my mother and father, you called Teti Mary, that meant aunt in Polish, whatever. Mr. This,
Yeah.
Mr. that. I never would call my friends' parents by their first name.
No.
That's.
Well, that's changed, hasn't it?
Oh, that's one thing.
But what if a parent wants their child to recognize that there are, that you treat an adult, you're trying to teach your child to respect people and be respectful in how they're acknowledging them. And then the person undercuts you. It happened almost every time I tried, so that I ended up and then the preschool he went to. The preschool. They called, when he was a 2-year-old, he called his teacher June.
No, what the guy said?
And I said, and this is a very progressive preschool,
Well,
and
I
I
know.
remember saying,
I
I
know.
really don't want him to call you June.
No.
But that was that school's whole thing. And I thought, you're undercutting me.
That's what's going on, and I know you're busy here, but that's the whole key in this whole world. Instead of the commandments say, or the quote, if you believe the Bible, love one another, I'd say this. Instead of loving one another, because that's a bunch of baloney, let's say respect one another. I can't love everybody. I can't love people that I don't like or don't know, but I can respect you. And I think that's a more higher value than...
Respect. Yeah,
than
respect.
love is higher than respect, because that's bullshit. Quit bullcrapping me. You don't love me. I don't love you. Love my family. I can't love a stranger. I can respect a stranger. I can respect my elders. I can respect a young child. But I cannot love them if I don't know them. And maybe they're not maybe they're not deserving of love. They are deserving of respect, but not love. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Thanks, Lynn.
You're welcome. Thank you. Colette writes, around 1996, I pissed off my friend when I questioned how her 12-year-old son got to his music lessons after school. It was about a mile away. She made him hop on a bus, then transfer to another bus at the T 2 miles away. Then he had to take that bus back another mile. Ridiculous. I think it took 45 minutes. I asked her why he didn't just ride his bike. You'd have thought I suggested he catch a ride with an axe murderer. I'm amazed that she let her 12-year-old son hop on a bus. She was already there. Believe me, I remember I was so happy when I gave my son bus maps when he was like about 12, I think he was. And told him, this is how you figure out how to get places. I don't have time to be chauffeuring you around town. And he did. He learned how to, and you don't think you feel good. And he would get confronted with maybe problems, wrong bus, whatever. But he had to solve these problems. And the other thing people are noticing now, and apparently counselors in colleges are saying they are inundated with kids who are coming apart at the seams over kinds of problems that kids used to be able to solve. Hi, caller.
Yes, Clarence again.
Clarence again.
I'm working on something where I have to sit at my computer, so...
All right, that's your
But anyway,
excuse. Okay.
Two quick stories about respect and calling somebody Mr. or this, that, or the other thing.
Yeah.
Way back in the 90s, the magistrate of Canonsburg, it was Walter Mark. Everybody called him Wally. And he said, "Oh, you can call me Wally, Clarence." I'm like, "No, I can't."
Yeah.
Well, everybody calls me Wally. I said, "Seriously, I can't."
Can't. Right, I know the
way I
feeling.
was raised, it would kill me every time I said your name. And then I said, I came up with something cool. I said, how about if I call you Uncle Wally? He says, "Oh, I love it." We were friends ever since. So I call you Uncle Wally.
Yeah, that may at least give him an honorific of some
I had to
sort.
give him something.
Right.
But and then when my nephew, my favorite nephew, he turned like 18, he decided to call me Clarence. And there's only 14 years between us. And so one time he was at work, and I go to his job, and he says, Clarence, my mom said that the reason why you don't do things and help me out anymore is because I don't call you uncle. I said, yeah, that's exactly right. I said, Uncle Clarence will do anything for his nephew. Clarence ain't got no time.
Jeez. Did he go back to uncle?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
We're talking. That was also the '90s. You know what I mean? And his wife calls me uncle. His wife's brother calls me uncle.
You know what?
You have to call me Uncle Clarence. You can't call me Clarence. You got to call me. You got to call me Uncle Clarence.
Well, my family is the same. I mean, my grown children, all the kids are grown, the next generation. But everybody is uncle and aunt, uncle and aunt, uncle and aunt. And when speaking of them, speaking of my brother to my son, I always say Uncle Billy.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right.
Well, here's the thing. Now, here's the downside to it. The folks that I met on from your show, Sissy White Liberal and Blovius, their kids call me Clarence because because those darn hippie liberals couldn't.
I gotcha.
You know what I mean? Couldn't. I said, no, it's Mr. Clarence, it's Mr. Clarence, it's Mr. Clarence, it's Mr. Clarence. And then I just gave up after, 10 years of
Huh. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Well, I'm old-fashioned like you.
Uh-huh.
I am.
Yeah, and it's that thing. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Just one more quick story. There's this old guy in the Canonsburg. His name was Mr. Slater. But everybody called him Slater. Everybody that I knew called him Slater. And he was like a poor guy, almost homeless, all this stuff. So one time I said, how you doing, Slater? He goes, what'd you call me, boy? I said, is your name Slater? He goes, no, it's Mr. Slater. I was like, oh, I'm sorry.
Right.
I thought that man was going to kill me.
Yeah. He might have been down and out, but he was still worthy of respect from you.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And that was my life lesson. That was in the 80s. That was my life lesson. It's like, I don't care if I'm just some poor guy. I'm still Mr. You're right.
That's wonderful. Great stories, Clarence. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank
Bye.
you. William said, thinking about that last caller who talked about the difference between respect and love, it reminded me that at one time Kurt Vonnegut worried that all of his writing could come down to just a single thought. Love may fail, but courtesy will prevail. Vonnegut was wrong, of course. He had so much to say, but it gave him pause. I mean, he was wrong about that being the only thing that would survive, but he's not wrong about love may fail, but courtesy will prevail. The problem is he's also wrong about that because we have jettisoned courtesy and respect and honor and that kind of thing. Our culture doesn't recognize it at all, practically, anymore. So it's quaint now, it's old-fashioned, and it's very hard if you're a more old-fashioned parent. I guess that's because I was an older parent. I mean, I was 44 when I became a parent, and that's old. So anyway, I was going to say about college counseling, because I'm not surprised to hear it. College counseling offices have seen a doubling in the rate of emergency calls in the last 5 years, mainly for problems that kids used to solve on their own. Something as silly as finding a mouse in the room. Something as silly as a roommate calling them names. That kids now run to a counselor rather than just deal with it. That kids now call their moms immediately with any problem they have is too bad. Too bad. Because the capability is there now, and most mothers aren't going to say, you figure it out, which is what they should say. Honey, you should be able to figure that out. Go ahead. You figure it. How do you become a functional, independent person? My son used to get so angry at me. He would say, he'd be reading and he'd say, what does so-and-so mean? Or how do you spell blah, blah, blah? And I don't know why he kept asking, because he always got the same response. Look it up. Look it up. Okay, so here's what this psychologist says, who had been seeing all these scared kids in college, who are brilliant kids, have had all the lessons. They've been shepherded here, there, and everywhere. They're smart. They're nice kids. They just have no sense that they can handle a goddamn thing. So listen, he says, students are prepared academically, but they are not prepared to deal with life. And that comes from a lack of opportunity to deal with ordinary problems. Over the past 60 years, there has been a huge change, and it's well documented by social scientists. In the hours a day a child plays outdoors, in children creating their own play, in children having free time. And the whole thing is, childhood should be exactly that, a time of freedom. Childhood should not be about building a goddamn resume for college. Maybe the pendulum will swing back. I don't know. Jeez, it's still snowing? But it's not going to amount to much. No big deal. Oh, there was a great letter to the editor the other day from Bob Uriniak in Hopewell. And I just wanted to share it with you. I'm not going to do all of it. He noted that Brazil is just appointed as its science and technology minister, a guy who says global warming is incompatible with current knowledge. Which does not spell good things to come for the Amazon River basin and forests. Okay, so then he goes on to say, but it's not just Brazil. We can look here to home. The chairman, he said, of the U.S. Senate's Committee on Environment and Public Works, Republican James Inhofe of Oklahoma, has called global warming or climate change a hoax. In fact, he wrote a book about it in 2012 called The Greatest Hoax: How the Global Warming Conspiracy Threatens Your Future. This is the guy in a Republican Congress who will now head the Committee on Environment. The letter writer goes on. It has become the mantra of far too many office holders and rank-and-file Republicans. They hold these opinions in spite of the fact that scientists are nearly unanimous when it comes to mankind's negative impact on the climate. Unfortunately, these deniers see scientifically established facts as being biased because they don't square with their ideological agendas. In his monumental and still relevant City of God, which he started writing in the year 413, St. Augustine of Hippo observed, quote, "Stupidity glories in never yielding to the force of truth." That took the wind out of my sails when I read that quote, because I thought, oh, shit. If an observer of human foibles in the year 413 could write that, which could be written right now, today, we're dealing then with human nature, and God help us. Stupidity glories in never yielding to the force of truth. The letter writer finishes up by saying, so far, mankind has been lucky. It has survived 16 centuries and more of stupidity. Whether it can survive 17 centuries remains to be seen. Good letter, sir. Good letter. There's a real fascinating whodunit happening in Argentina. And if you watch network news, or I guess even CNN, I don't know if CNN would cover it. I mean, these are the kind of stories that Americans don't know about unless you read a really good newspaper and unless you're interested in some ways. But this could obviously, books will be written and have been written about this. And I don't have time to go into it now, but it involves a supposed suicide that occurred, I think, on Monday. And this was of a man who, for 10 years, has been compiling a report for the president and the nation of Argentina on who is responsible for the worst terrorist attack in South America since World War. No. The worst terrorist attack, that wouldn't be right. Oh, it's one of the deadliest anti-Semitic attacks since World War II. And it happened in Argentina and it happened a long time ago now. And this guy who was looking into it and he was about to testify the next day, he's found dead in his apartment. And you know what he was going to do? He was going to point the finger at the president of the country. And all kinds of things are already happening. The gun was found right next to him, but there were no burns on his fingers. Everybody is saying, he says, it's not that the president did it. The president was making deals with the people who did it, saying essentially, hey, we'll shut up about this and let you guys go if you give us oil. And it was Iran that they were making deals with, because it was Iran and Hezbollah who blew up a Jewish center in Buenos Aires, and it killed 85 people were killed. And somehow no one has ever been found who did it. This, is fascinating story. And the New York Times is covering it really well. And if you want a good whodunit, there one is. We'll end with just a few. Yes, colon cancer. Thank you, Janet. Why couldn't we come up with that? Humorous story, if there can be such a thing, about colon cancer. A Pittsburgh hospital published a quarterly newsletter in which doctors were spotlighted. A black female doctor's story was published along with her picture. This doctor had colon cancer. The caption under the picture said, doctors had successful color surgery. An R instead of an N. The Janet, who's writing this, says, the doctor was very gracious about this spell check mistake. Oh, man. Okay, and Milton writes about fear in parenting. NPR's newest podcast, Invisibilia, spent the first few minutes of this week's show discussing how parents' unsubstantiated fears have actually directly affected their children's ability, to roam free and establish their own sense of independence. Oh, good. See, people are starting to try to save these poor kids. The show cites an interesting study that was originally conducted in the 70s, which involved a researcher asking children aged 3 through 12 to show the researcher how far in the town they lived that they were allowed to roam from their homes. The researcher compiled the findings and returned to the town years later and conducted the same study with the town children. Same age group, different children, different time, and was shocked to find that the distance the children of the 90s were allowed to travel was significantly less. Well, I got to tell you, 90s, if you did that now, I bet the kids are on leashes and they're not allowed out of the house without mommy. The researcher concluded that the proliferation of fear in the parents induced by increased media attention on mass murders and child abductions. It is so true. It is so true. I got to tell you, media, jeez. It's been my bread and butter, but I got to tell you, it does such damage to us. This is why I always argued that one of the most important classes that should be taught in our schools is media literacy, so that children or anybody watching, listening, see what's coming at them for what it often is. An effort to scare you into staying with your eyeballs wide and your mouth open looking at media. Media. They live to terrify because terror drives you back to them. I'm telling you, you all know a million of these parents. Start talking to them. Start trying to see if they can be not stupid, but deal with facts. And their stupidity and fear is harming their children, not helping them. All right, that's it. Oh, my God, that's more than it. Okay, we're out of here. Out of here. I got to tell you Sokolowski, I guess, tomorrow. Is it Thursday already? Gee whiz. Okay, tomorrow, Sokolowski. Toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.